Well, I've got a lovely guy here, Terence Smith, who was one of the inaugural Bloomberg Public Innovation Fellows. Um, a few years back, in fact, 2 years back, you were at the stage at the Creative Bureaucracy Festival. But can I just ask you, when you heard that word, creative bureaucracy, what did you think, Terence?
I would tell you on the front end, I thought it was a very interesting and positive spin on what had become a very negative word or had been synonymous with negativity and laziness. I honestly, as a public innovator, really enjoyed the term. And it spoke to me. It taught me that, this is reflective of what I've seen in the city that I was working with and the people that I was working with. I understood that, there are very creative people who work inside of cities and the public sector. And so that it felt like, it was like a homecoming of creative minds to come together and share their insights and share their thoughts without the fear of being ridiculed.
Oh, right. Well, I love that answer. Obviously, that's great. Because, in fact, I mean, Terence used to be the Public Innovation Officer in Mobile, Alabama, and now is Chief Innovation Officer in Baltimore, which is really good. Now, you were on the stage at the festival. I mean, did the festival in general have any impact on you? You met people, I think, or what happened?
I will tell you, so the festival was a very unique experience, right? There's this international experience where we're having these great conversations with people from all around the world who are also they're approaching problems from various ways and with this level of enthusiasm that no, that's very seldomly seen. For me, though, being on stage, it's like being on stage in front of a group of your peers, um, like in almost like to a therapy session where people are there. You can look at their faces and understand that they know exactly what you're talking about, but you also know that they're receiving the message because at some point in their life they've been there or they're in it right now, or they're headed that way. And so they're able to hear and receive the messages in ways that most people would not be able to. They also come prepared for the message, though, prepared to learn and prepared to make connections. So I would say, upon leaving that stage, most of the times you get on stage, no matter how seasoned you are as a speaker, you come in and you're a bit nervous. I think, but from the moment of standing in line at the Creative Bureaucracy Festival to registering to finding your seat, there's no sense of like stress or anxiety because everyone there is so positive and so open and so ready. They've already read your profile. You've read their profile, so you're excited about the experience. And so I would say, yeah, the impact for me though was still maintaining those connections from around the world, having the opportunity to serve on the jury with people that I had heard about and had seen before, and having that connection, and then just being able to maintain those connections as I'm confronting issues within city government.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, one of the top issues you've always had, I believe, right from the beginning, is this whole issue of trust, which is such a big, massive word and a bit slippery in some sense. I mean, can you just explain to me a bit how you got into trust being the topic that in your fellowship was something you could really think about in detail, but you'd obviously thought about it before?
Yes, I would tell you. So in my previous work in Mobile, and it was my work in Mobile, Alabama was the first time I had ever worked in city government. So before that, I was in nonprofits and education and mental health work. But when I got to the city, I realized that, I am stepping into this entity that has long-standing historical issues with people, some good, some bad. And we were inheriting all those issues where we were now responsible for either fixing it or we were going to be casting a light that we were maintaining the issues. And so for me, I realized that if I'm in a space, especially Mobile, like a traditional city, 300-year-old city steeped in tradition, and here I am talking about innovating, which is changing things and moving in a different direction, I realized that all the methodologies in the world wouldn't really help me if people didn't trust me, if they weren't into the space where they can look at me and think that this person and this team of people can actually do what they say they're going to do. and they could do it without harming me, and they could do it without me watching over my shoulders every 5 minutes. And so for me, my time in Mobile taught me the importance of that. But then my time as a fellow allowed me to dig deep within this topic of trust, to take this complicated topic, which was primarily thought of as binary. Either you trust someone or you distrust someone, to a nuanced spectrum of like, here's a spectrum that goes from cynicism all the way to complete trust. And where we need to start thinking about trust is this managed, it's just this dynamic to be managed, not a binary approach. And so for me, thinking about my experience in Mobile and then going back out to this international network of people who had also worked in government to think about this topic. And to my surprise, all of my friends across the world had also had these issues with trust. And we just needed language to actually codify what we were doing and the feelings that we were having. So from that, we created a framework. So the research took place in Finland, and conversations in Denmark and Colombia and Kansas City and Mobile and 14 other cities across the US, to also understand how do we engender the level of trust needed to innovate, which would mean that we were, and the reason why this is important is because we need to be able to get people to be vulnerable and take risk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that point about vulnerability, because so often things are, look, oh, I'm cool, I know what I'm doing, whereas in the reality, we're all a bit frightened and so on. But did you come across, I mean, sort of examples from your conversations with colleagues across the world that where you suddenly said, oh my God, this is a way of doing it, or is there a methodology, or is it just a lot of empathy and human qualities that are required?
Yeah, I will tell you, certainly there's a lot of empathy and human qualities required, but I will tell you that there is a process and there's a framework and there are things that can be replicated. And I think that that's the biggest misnomer, is that, it's either you can do it or you can't. It's like, no, we can all learn to do it, because really goes back to, we're talking about, we want to be trusted, but we have to be trustworthy first, right? And this
Uh-huh.
notion of trustworthy is not something that I went looking for, but I came across it in, especially in spaces like Barranquilla, Colombia, where I'm learning that, that in order to be trusted, you have to be trustworthy, which means that you have to be able to display your ability, your humanity, and your integrity. Inside of Barranquilla, what I realized is that at one point they were the Golden Gate of Colombia, and then they went solo in their trust journey that people stopped paying their taxes. The residents stopped paying their taxes. So then the government had to then come in and take very intentional approaches inside of the neighborhoods, outside of city halls, and on the ground with the people. Now you have the mayor, people have the mayor's WhatsApp number, and they could write him directly and check up behind the resident, check up behind city employees to ensure that things are going in the right way. The city hall was moving outside, where now they're having these meetings directly with the people. They're hearing what's happening. They're being attentive. They're assuming responsibility for their work. They're showing this level of competency needed, but they're also being responsive to the needs of the people. And once you saw that happen, now you see the entire city coming together to collaborate. One of the most amazing things that I saw in Barranquilla, and one of the greatest lessons learned, was this topic of this notion of functional units. In the rest of the world, they did projects in phases, right? But they have 3-year mayoral terms, which is a very short time to get things done. So
Yeah.
what they would do is they were say, hey, this is the grand vision for this area. However, we're going to create this functional unit which has everything that you need. And if we finish this in 3 years, you have this thing and it has all the components of what you need to actually move on. So what happens is, for the next mayoral term and the next mayor that's coming in, the next administration, they now can build the second functional unit attached to this first one. And so what happens is, it leaves the residents though with this really good feeling that if I give my input, I can see a product and an end goal within this time frame. And so it gives them the energy to join forces with the next administration to keep going. And so for me, that was a really powerful lesson of how do you build and then sustain trust across administrations.
What about, was there anything different, let's say, in the Nordic countries? Because you did the stuff in, as you said, in Finland and Denmark. Was there a different sort of lesson you learnt there? Or
Yeah,
were
so
they?
yeah, really interesting. One of the lessons that I learned in the Nordics, Vanta, especially, is that there was this thought that, that I went there to see, I went there to understand, countries that have the highest levels of trust in the world, right? What does that look like and what does that feel like? Because I had only had the experience of cities that were from the mid-level to the lowest level of trust. When I got there, I realized that that was a very interesting dynamic at play, because, the city itself was homogenized, and that that people, they understood how things work. The government worked so well that no one had to question anything. But because even Vanta was starting to rapidly diversify and grow, they started having the tensions that everyone has, right? You have people who are not from Finland, who are coming in and they want to be a part of the government. Well, they bring their own experiences, their own perspectives, and they have their own questions. And so what you saw was, instead of having these low levels of trust, on this other side, you have this very high level of trust, competing with the new perspectives and the new experiences of people who have not come from spaces who have those high levels of trust. And so you start to realize that at some point, uh, at the extremes, um, complete trust is just as detrimental to innovation as cynicism. And so one of the things that we learn from that is that we all have to working towards the middle. And how do we keep ourselves between this level of optimal low, which is I am going to trust but verify what you're saying, and we become comfortable with that, versus uh, optimal high, which is that I trust you because you have been consistent enough and being able to display why you do certain things. There's a level of procedural fairness, informational fairness, interpersonal fairness, that allows us to understand why things are happening, and who are they happening for, and then how are we prioritizing things. And I think so that lesson itself, from both from Finland and both from Colombia, helps to paint an amazing picture of the spectrum of trust itself that I would
Yeah,
not
but
have
that's,
found if not been on the ground.
yeah, no, that's interesting because obviously I haven't thought of what you've just said, because you tend to say, what's optimal trust and off we go. Whereas you were partly implying, I feel, you can get into a sort of groupthink and bubble when it's to that other extreme. But just picking up the point about innovation, I mean, I think you were also implying and saying, that to innovate, it's really a precondition. Trust is a precondition. Uh, have you got a couple of examples there around that,
Yes.
where someone was trying to do something? Obviously, they were willing to do it well, but then failed or whatever. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll give you an example from Baltimore, mainly because that's where I am now, and I'm not from Baltimore. I'm not from the Northeast at all. I'm from the Deep South, and so
Yeah,
coming into Baltimore now to work on housing vacancy prevention and public safety, retention and recruitment. One of the things that you realize is that no matter what you're going to work on inside of a city, people have to trust you. They need to know that, hey, if I've heard promises before, what makes this time different? What makes this different, right? What is going to be different about now? If I give you all my information and participate in your research project, what am I going to get out of it? And so one of the things that we started to do on the very front end, in the city is start to like engage very early and often. So I'll give you an example. Um, in our public safety work, we know that we need more police officers, more people, more applicants to be converted into police officers. And that could be a long route. For us, though, we tackle the issue of younger people to understand how do we get young people involved in that process. So having those conversations with not only younger people but youth providers, to understand their barriers and their concerns of where they are going. So part of the barriers, and you'll appreciate this as a creative bureaucrat, is that there's a thought that young people did not want to become police officers. But now you're going to have those direct conversations with them, as we all know that's very important. The attentiveness, listening, and observing. We realize that there was a barrier to becoming a police officer, and that was having a driver's license. And so we connected them to this a delivery partner, which is a driving school instructor who's also a mentor. who would work with them. Then we pair it with a funder, and then pair it with the city as an owner. And what you saw was that this explosion of young people joining the cadet program to become police officers. And
That's a
that's
brilliant
an example of being a creative bureaucrat, right?
No, no, but it's a brilliant example because it's not the first thing you think about. You think, oh my God, there's this complicated thing. And then you end up saying, can you help me get a driver's license? It's
Yes.
really a brilliant example, Terence. Can I just focus on just another little topic, given that we're all looking ahead and, there are a lot of people are saying negative things about public administrations and so on. But what in general do you think are the big challenges for a public administration, a bureaucracy, looking ahead a bit?
Yeah, I think right now is, this is an important time to consider local government. Local government, they're always in need of really, really good people and to solve complicated problems. I think right now, right now, unlike any other time, but just like, the challenges are exacerbated now where we think about the negativity spewed at the local level. I think oftentimes what happens is because the local level is closest to where the people are, it's closest to the delivery. It's where the rubber meets the road, right? And so I think that if you wanted to make a change, if you wanted to see immediate impact of your work, local government is the place. It is also the place where your skills would be quickly picked up and used upon your arrival because we it's all hands on deck all the time. And so I think, oftentimes what I believe is that we have to one thing I'm appreciative so much about the Creative Bureaucracy Festival is that it tells a better story about the state of local government and the bureaucracy, right? Of course, there's thoughts that that bureaucracy itself is a dirty word, um, but there's the other side of that is there are very creative and worthy people working inside of those governments every day to deliver really, really high level and impactful projects and initiatives. We just don't have those stories. And so I think part of the challenge is ensuring that we're telling the right story of the work that's being
Yeah.
done today and humanizing the people who are actually taking up those challenges every day.
Well, what I'm hearing before I ask my last question is really if you can present yourself as your authentic self without any masks or anything like that, in all your good and bad and your vulnerabilities, just like a human being, that actually somehow generates trust. And you haven't even used the big word somehow. But that's what I'm hearing from what you're saying. My final question, Terence, because you're a bit experienced in this field, what advice would you give to other public servants, either younger ones or even older ones? Have you got a bit of advice there?
Yeah, I would tell you, pick something that you're passionate about. If you go into this work, know that it is going to be challenging, right? Because you're dealing with people from all walks of life every day. But I can promise you, from my experience, if you listen and you observe and you're willing to be responsive to the needs of the people and you're willing to shift your timelines to fit the needs of those people, this work will be hard on the front end, but you will be amazed at how smoothly it works on the back end when people understand that you are actually trustworthy, that you're doing it for the right reason. And we're all gonna make mistakes because we're human. I think that what I've learned in my own journey inside of the public sector is that when we make mistakes, identify those mistakes and work to amend those trust violations. The world needs so many people that are authentic and truthful in their walks and that are not superheroes, but people who are just like us. They want to see people that look like them and feel like them working in government. And I think that if you can walk into that with that understanding and knowing that every day is going to be a learning journey, then you're more likely to be a winner in the race.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks, Terence. That was great. I'm so glad we had this conversation, and I understand trust better than I did before. I can assure you, and how important it is in terms of public institutions, etc. Well, we'll see you hopefully very soon again in person. And just so everybody else knows, the next session, starting from the top of the hour, will be another set of workshops. See you there. Bye.
Bye.